Welcome to the What is Smart podcast. We dive deep into the ever-evolving world of intelligence, learning, and success. Join us as we engage with leading educators, psychologists, technologists, and thinkers, unraveling insights and challenging old notions. From EQ to creativity, from tech savviness to social awareness, What is Smart is your guide to understanding intelligence in the 21st century. Let's change education together. Hello, everybody, and welcome to What is Smart. What is Smart is brought to you by the Gardens Foundation. We are doing the work it takes to change education. We've got dudes in the vans and the bunkers in the trenches of the war it is to actually prepare our kids for a future that will actually exist, not the one that we're preparing them for now, which is actually the past. You can buy merch from us on our website. It helps to go towards our first project, the very first study we put together with Johns Hopkins University School of Education Policy, Global Pathways. All proceeds go to that. We are fundraising currently, and so we need your help, guys. Please do visit. It's going to be right here, www.thegardensfoundation.org, and purchase your sweatshirts, your What is Smart t-shirts. We're going to have hoodies soon, all kinds of great stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the team in the background searching the inner world wide webs for amazing people, and today is no different. Today, we have with us Mr. Will Reusch. I hope I said that right. I'm a German guy. So Will Reusch, educator and mentor with a mission to promote viewpoint diversity and critical, I'm going to say this again, critical thinking. And in fact, I'm going to put it up there just so it goes bling, bling, right there in high school education, something that from my knowledge, we are lacking in this country, critical thinking and logic in general. So we welcome Will Reusch. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We truly appreciate it here at What is Smart.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, this is it's nice to be here and talk about this. We're shoulder to shoulder going up against a Goliath. So the more allies we have, it's like the Rebel Alliance.
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Oh my goodness, that is actually the best way of putting it. Is we're the Rebel Alliance going against the dark side. And yeah, thank you so much for your content, the work you're doing. And that being said, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about your origin story. What brought you into the awareness, first of all, of like, hey, education is lacking in so many different areas, and we can actually fundamentally change the world through it. So what was your journey to that?
So I got into education. I decided to become an education major. I was a criminal justice major in college for a month, if that. And then I switched over to education, and it was great. I mean, I was the first time in school. I wasn't great at school. I didn't love school, but it was the first time that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I think that I'm just naturally a curious person. So I got a job. I moved from Pennsylvania, went to Penn State, and then moved out here right after I graduated and got a job. I couldn't get a job at like a normal school, so I went to a small charter school, and it was wonderful because it allowed me to do a lot of fun, creative things that I wanted to do. And I talked to my friends who were in public schools, and they're like, "Oh, I could never do that, or I could never do that." So I've been in two different public charters, and then now I'm at a private religious school. And as much as I would have liked to have more diverse, school structure experiences, it was great because I was able to just kind of run with it my whole career. So, just with different ideas and testing things out. And I always went to places that it was important for me to be like, so that's my neighbor's loud car.
Okay.
It was very important for me to be able to have freedom in doing my practice. That's very, very important for me. And I've always been like an outside the box thinker, I suppose. As far as what got me into the culture war stuff was in 2015, 2016, I would say, right around the time Trump was running for office and stuff like that. There was stuff happening on college campuses with Nick Christakis, Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, these people who are, kind of more well known now. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast because on my commute, because I'm a jiu-jitsu guy and love muscle cars and all that kind of nonsense.
I listen as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, this is cool. But then these guys are coming on talking about this wild ideology that's going through and attacking critical thinking and attacking reasonable, reason and logic and stuff like that. and it was all on the college campuses. I was like, I'm seeing elements of this in high schools too.
Right.
And so I was like, where are the high school teachers that are talking about this stuff? I'm seeing college professors, a few of them, but I don't see any high school teachers or even K through 12 teachers talking about this, like none. So I was like, I got to start talking about this. So that's when I started my own podcast and I started my social media and stuff like that, was just to talk about these issues. And then as far as like the problems within education, it kind of just came as my network grew, because I knew some of the problems. I knew about the problems with standardized testing and lower standards and stuff like that, lower standards for behavior and stuff, but I didn't know the scope of it. I was kind of just in my little bubble. So it was after I grew a network through social networks, you meet all these different teachers from all over the country and stuff like that, join different fellowships with different universities and stuff. And then I was like, oh, this is a really big problem. So it just became this avalanche of information coming to my way of the problems a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the context.
Yeah.
It's helpful, one, to understand that, because some of the great people that we talk to on this podcast tend to root their purpose in experience, right? Like, so, driven people like yourself had to have some kind of pain points that you experienced along the way. What I would say, you mentioned something really interesting, which is culture. And culturally within schools, I think because, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, because of the lack of, I don't know, instruction around logic and critical thinking, because of society's cultural need via social media to kind of fit into boxes and get into echo chambers, what do you see is the most helpful way to break that up, to throw a wrench in that experience that we all kind of experience every single day, which is looking at our phone, getting news that only is one-sided, if you will, which then ultimately informs everything. And what people don't see is that the adults in children's lives help to inform their own experiences that then show up in schools like high schools and such. So in your own experience, what have you seen helps to kind of open critical thinking up with learners, especially at the high school level?
So curiosity. So you have what is smart kind of concept. And I think it goes to curiosity. I think that the school system, the history of it. I'm sure your listeners know the history of it, with like the Prussian army and the Rockefellers and stuff. It's an obedience model. It's trying to build obedient people. So the bell, you sit down at the bell. Think about what makes a good student. A good student is someone who does what they're told. It's someone who sits down when they're told to sit down, stands up when they're told to stand up.
Yeah.
They do what the teacher, the sage on the stage just says information, then you just say it back. Okay. So trying to break that is, you have to break that concept of, if you're going to be critical thinking, then you say, why should I sit down? Why? And you lean into curiosity. A lot of teenagers do it in rhetorical questions, but I think, and adults do too, how could you vote for this person? As opposed to leaning into the curiosity of, bring me in. Like, what am I missing here? Tell me truly how you could vote for this person that I see as so repugnant. Why do you not see them as repugnant? I think leaning into that's a great way. And what you have to do though, is you have to humble yourself. You have to realize that, some intellectual humility of like, you don't have all the answers. So I think that's an important thing. I love seeking disconfirmation as opposed to confirmation bias when it comes to breaking up echo chambers. I think that, saying, what's the best argument against my perspective, and trying to, seek that out. I just find that as a more exciting journey. And I think my students see that in me, that like whatever beliefs I have, they're kind of loosely held based on whatever information comes my way. So if I am doing that in real time in front of them, and it gives them permission to, it's okay to be wrong, because if you're wrong, you're proven wrong, then you're one step closer to being right. And you do that a lot enough, you end up being pretty smart.
Great answer. And I think in a classroom environment, I think the challenge is this, right? And I'm sure you experience this challenge every day, which is you mentioned at the beginning, like, I'm an outside the box thinker. I would agree. I'm definitely that person as well, too. Empowering learners to be outside the box thinkers against a system that is inside the box, right? So you're empowering them with tools that might allow them to be successful. In fact, I know will allow them to be successful at 20, at 25, at 30. But for the current experience, the damage is still getting done, which is, and maybe, maybe that is fought back with critical thinking, having the understanding that high school is 4 years of your life. You know what I mean? It's not the world, but I see that as such because there's folks like you that are doing work in silos across the country, right? And unless those silos break open, and this is what I'm hoping to do with the foundation and pulling these people together to say this is working in classes. Have you seen direct results of empowering what I look at as soft skills, right? Not just critical thinking, logic, but empathy, compassion, curiosity, understanding, all of these things that you and I both know will allow children to be successful in the future. Have you seen the outcomes? Have you been teaching long enough to kind of see learners move on past you and then come back to you with their success or lack of success stories?
Yeah, it's been really cool because I've been in the classroom full time for 17 years. So the students who I think the first graduating class that I had was 2007. So, you do the math, like they're in their mid 30s now, with a bunch of kids and stuff like that. And I keep in touch with many of them. Yeah, I think that the critical thinking, the empathy, all that stuff is all important. But I think one thing also that's really important is courage. It's grit, it's resiliency. And that's the stuff that the students that do come back, that I still keep in touch with, that they pulled from my class, is this idea of like, if you have this idea, you're critical thinking, but you're in a system, like you said, that like punishes that, then how do you maintain yourself? Is you have to say, I'm going to stand up and say what I know to be true. And if I get knocked down, I will get back up again. Like the idea of, if you fail, it's okay. Learn from that and move on. I mean, we know that you either fail or you either, win or you learn, like that kind of idea. So that's a big one for me that I've gotten from students who come back, is like, you taught me about like, it's okay to fail, big picture, you fail your way to success, and then having the courage to go for it, to not take the easy route, to not just go, take what life hands you, but to take some chances. Those are the kids that have reached out to me and said, that was the biggest impact. They don't remember the War of 1812 or whatever I was teaching in their class. They remember that kind of stuff.
And that's what you want them to remember. I always
Yeah.
kind of think learning is moving towards not what to learn, but how to learn.
Yeah,
because we've moved dramatically away from that. I think we're now to the point within our schooling system where, I was talking with this guy, Paul France, an education consultant on the podcast, and he said, if the system was going to work, especially the No Child Left Behind Act, if that was going to work, it would have worked in the 80s. It would have worked in the 90s. I think the reason why we're stuck is it's this complete loop, right? I don't think we lack innovation in our country. I think the innovation pings against our current system, and that is like the strongest wall ever. And so the reason I mention that is I think the future is through providing experiences that you give to your students in your classroom at scale. And so thinking, how do we scale out a very human to human experience? Running an AI company made me realize that the future is not in technology. The future is actually in human interaction, because that's what we're moving away from. This is social life now, right? And I'm not knocking it. Like, I'm not saying like, hey, the future is, these kids these days. What I'm saying is that it's changed, and we were forced to be social growing up. We were, in the backyard playing with our friends. All of these experienced kids don't have, especially after COVID. That time frame where it's equal parts fear, but then I think the damage was really done with parents putting their fears and anxieties on their children. That's where the damage was done. So reasonably, I'm a critical thinker. I look at everything in a non-political kind of open and curious way. But there was a way to look at COVID, right? Like, yes, trust data, yes, trust science, but also be a critical thinker about certain things. And, you had parents kind of still to this day obsessing. The point is that I think ultimately the future is in the classroom. We can establish standards, we can establish all of these things, but at the end of the day, Will, you're going to do your thing. you're going to be in your classroom and you're going to be breaking barriers down. And thankfully, you found the private, myself included. I always had the opportunity to be like, now, mind you, my field is early learning, to be like, hey, we're going to do a cultural day. And hey, we're going to do all of these different ideas that some of them worked, some of them didn't. But like you said, even when they didn't, my kids saw that they didn't work and saw how I responded to that, which was with jest and curiosity and humbleness, right? So given, that you've been in the classroom, I know now you're offering a lot of this kind of professional development and professional development experiences. Is this a two-parter, meaning like you're still in the classroom every day and you're doing this?
Yeah. So to this year, I'm part-time. So my school, I've been there for like 11 years, and the school is great. It's a religious school that has already a structure of like an operating system. So a lot of the, lack of a better term, like woke or critical social justice stuff, that's in LA. I'm in LA, so like it's very present here in the public schools and stuff like that, and a lot of the private schools too. It didn't really take hold there, so I've had a lot of public conversations where people get upset and they send messages, emails or whatever. This guy is a whatever phobe or ist or whatever it is, and my school's like, we know who you are. The families love you. The kids love you. You're great. Stop. Like, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. Just keep doing your thing. So that's really rare. Like I don't get poison ivy. So like I don't get poison ivy. So when I was a kid and the football rolled into the poison ivy, they would just be like, all right, Reusch, go in and get it. Because I didn't get itchy. And in some ways, I'm kind of like that at the school that I'm at. The school that I'm at, they allow me to get, talk about these issues of like race and gender and all this kind of stuff that a lot of teachers do have on their mind. But if they talked about it openly, they would get fired. And they are certain of that they would be reprimanded in a very serious way. So they, messaged me privately, thank you for being kind of like our mouthpiece, because I'm able to do it. I'm part-time this year to build homeschooling curriculum, because you brought up scale. And this is a really tricky thing, because scale is directly connected with revenue. You make an app, you can scale
That's
it, where
right.
like the best nurse in the country, still what makes he or she the best nurse is that like personal connection. I think that I've been really great in the classroom, but a lot of it is because of that personal connection. And I don't know how to scale good education. Whether it's like a platform, it's a style. I know like Matt Boudreau runs like Apogee schools, and they're trying to grow that. Like there are these things, the stuff that you're doing, like with like it starts with one school, get the model, and then scale it out like that. But like I also know the way my mind works is not as much in like a business sense. Like I'm getting to the entrepreneurial world now a little bit, but I am a classroom teacher. I like being in front of the class, talking to my class, helping them work through things. How do I scale that? So instead of 25 students and 5 periods a day, do I get 2,500? Like, I mean, if the best teachers in the country should have the most students in the country, and the worst teachers should have the least. And that's not the way it is. I also think the best teachers should be compensated the best and the worst the least, but that's not the way it is. The best teacher gets paid the same as the worst teacher in the school. Okay.
Amen.
So there's all these things that I'm trying to like work out. So I'm building an online homeschooling and, micro school, or just supplementary, materials of everything that I've done throughout my career, just in my attempt to do exactly what you're talking about, which is scale the things that work. And I don't know, I'm kind of stumbling my way through it, but I want to do this. So I informed my school just like a couple of weeks ago that I'm taking a sabbatical next year. I'm going to try and build this framework. And then they're like, anytime you want to come back, we have a spot for you. We can teach kind of anywhere in the social sciences you want. They really want me, love me there. I'm very supported. But I want to try and attack this problem, the same problem that you're on too. You're like the early, and I'm like, like later, but we're both in K-12. Like, because we both recognize, like you said something that was really awesome, Garrett. You said like, it's those early formative years are so important for how to structure learning. I worked with Heterodox Academy for a while with like John Haidt,
Very cool.
who, talks about the phones and stuff. But they were so focused on college, and I convinced them to focus a little bit on K through 12, especially high school. Because I was like, by the time you're talking about viewpoint diversity and critical thinking and stuff when they're a freshman, it's too late. They've been indoctrinated into a lot of this crazy stuff, a lot of these schools, especially like out here in California. So it's too late. You got to focus earlier. And they were like, okay, cool. And then they had that program for a little bit. But you're kind of saying the same thing. Just like for me, it's like even high school, it's a little late. You got to go earlier. And I think that's accurate. I think it's like, from jump, how to learn is so important for these young minds. But way too much is put. I think way too much focus is put on like university students. I think it's way too late.
Well, you're looking at a system that doesn't work. You're
Yeah.
looking at ultimately, even in colleges, the fact that and not the minority, the majority of college students coming out of college look around and say, what do I do with my life, when the 4 years that they just spent and the $90,000 in student loan debts
Yeah.
was spent trying to figure that out. I mean, I'm thankful, right? I graduated high school with a 1.7, and I proudly display that in I just built my new office, but it's in a frame and it always goes up on the wall, because I point to my families when I'm talking. I have schools and all of that. And I tell them the reason why I have this framed is because it was not a representation of who I am. And I built schools because I was trying to buck this system. I think report cards need to be flipped, right? Like the social emotional aspect. I was talking with Dr. Thomas Hoer, who's an amazing, amazing dude, worked with Howard Gardner, multiple intelligences, all of that. And he said that the report cards at his school, typically you have this little section, behaves nicely, all of that with the O or whatever. His was flipped. The academics were down here. Every other aspect, empathy, grit, compassion, all of those things were front faced as the most important. But it's an example too of, this silo work. I think there are through lines that we're all learning in this experience, whether it's early learning on my end, whether it's, high school on your end. There are definite through lines. One is that the adults are getting in the way. Ego is getting in the way. Ultimately, we have a saying at my schools, ego is the great ruiner of education, right? Like it's the great destroyer of great, meaningful education. And then ultimately, because of that, you have a stuck system where the ego is going to be driving, and ego starts not just at the educator in the classroom who's 55, 60 years old going, I'm not doing anything different. I had to go through this system. Everything worked out for me. It's a totally different world, guy. You got to wake up. So one of the things that you had mentioned was a lot about cultural issues and social sciences within the classroom, and the fact that we're in this world now where if you say the wrong thing, and I can speak to you as a business owner, right? You say the wrong thing, your business is done. And I have opinions. I have opinions that surprise people. But to me, they're common sense opinions. And I love the fact that you're willing to put those out there and say things like, great teachers should be paid more. I agree with that. I'm fully, okay with saying that. One of the other things that you were talking about was these kind of cultural issues that blossomed into the world in the Trump society, in this kind of new world. I want to hear it from the child's perspective, from the learner's perspective, because I've always thought, I have 5 kids. One is, all the way from 5 to 17, right? And a lot of the issues that we are obsessing about as society, kids are like, that's like such an old issue. Let's focus on something that actually matters, right? Do you find that that's the same experience, or do you find that there are really interesting and thought about perspectives from learners these days?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on the kid. Like, how much are they in the world, as far as like usually on their phones, like, because then they're bombarded with a whole bunch of race and gender and war issues, Israel-Palestine issues, stuff like that. Like, it just depends on how much. And then there's other kids, like I have a bunch of kids who, like, I don't do social media. I don't do it. And they're just like, what's going on? Who? Trump, Biden? I don't know. I don't care. I have a soccer game. I'm in this league. I do this kind of stuff. I sing, I dance, whatever it is. Like, that's where their focus is. And they seem less anxiety ridden about the world because it's constantly bombarded with all kinds of negativity and stuff like that. So it depends on the kids. But what I've found is the beautiful thing about teaching teenagers is they're way more malleable. They're way more open. And in a lot of ways, they're more logical, which is strange because you would think that someone older who's like been of the world has this like wisdom, but I think a lot of adults are being corrupted by just like the culture wars and the weird, whatever it is, cable news stuff that they don't. There, and like the political teams, I'm on, team red or team blue or team woke or anti woke or whatever it is, like all that kind of stuff. The kids don't have that. So even when they do have an opinion, and I do this thing in my class, Garrett, if I can just share with you guys real quick. Like,
Yeah.
I say my job is there's two doors. You're constantly going to be making decisions. Do I go left or right in life? Up or down? There's two doors, door A and door B. My job is not to tell you to go through door A. It's to say, this is what door A is. The good, the bad, the ugly. This is everything about door A. Here's everything about door B. The good, the bad, the ugly. You guys make up your decisions and make it an informed decision. And I think that, kids like that. So if they say like, well, door A is the door that good people go through, then I just challenge that. What makes you say that? Well, that person's a good person, right? Is that person a good person? Yeah. Well, they went through door B. So what happens, challenge their hypothesis and stuff like that. It's that kind of stuff. The kids will shift because if they are, they're hardcore vegan or something like that, like they'll be vegan, for how long? How long you been vegan for? 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, but when something doing my podcast that I've learned a lot is about the importance of identity. How people identify really matters. I've had 9 different transgender people on my podcast because, again, I'm curious about that. And I've had, blue-haired kind of super critical social justice warrior types, trans activists. And I've had trans people that wear MAGA hats that were there on January 6th. So it's a diverse group, like any group of people. And what I found is the people that say, if I say like, how do you identify it? They say, I identify as a man or a woman or whatever it is, compared to, I've had transgender people that say, I identify as a computer programmer. And then a cat person, Corinna Cohn on my podcast, she's like, I would identify as a computer programmer, a cat person, someone who loves the theater, blah, 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 and, a trans woman. It's like way down there. So how you identify when you're young, you've lived in that identity. Your identity's kind of always shifting when you're young. You're a goth person and then you're an athlete, whatever. You're going through these different phases. I think a lot of adults have solidified who they believe themselves to be, like ideologically and stuff like that. So if you attack that or you question it, which they deem as attacking, then they feel a lot more threatened than the young people that I interact with. So young people are willing to change their mind, and that means that it's easy for a lot of teachers to go, okay, then I'm going to indoctrinate them into thinking like me because I know the right thing to do. And I see it as an opportunity to them to actually think like them, to decide how they should think through things. And that's what's really cool is I can change their mind to be more refined about what they actually think and has nothing to do with what I think, has to do with what they actually think.
So you're giving them the skills, the framework, the tools to craft and form their own informed opinions rather than kind of leading this echo chamber of society right now, which
repeating
is
back what you're supposed to say, which is again the way the school's structured. You're supposed to say, this person, blah, 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 did this at this time, or covalent bond is this. You're supposed to like memorize dates and facts and all that kind of stuff. And that's the way people go out into the world is like, the Republicans are the good one, or the Democrats are the good one, or the blah, 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 blah. It's like and as opposed to like, you ask them a few questions and their ideology just crumbles because they didn't actually think about it. The same way it works for school. They'll memorize, they'll be like, give me the test before I forget about it. Quick, write it down. And you ask them any kind of follow-up question, they just crumble.
Memorization and regurgitation is what I call it. It's ridiculous. So talking about that, because I'm super fascinated, I watched a video and I hilariously, right? Like you commented on Matt Walsh's comments around transgender, and specifically there was one transgender one, I can't remember her name.
Dylan Mulvaney.
Anyway, there you go. Yeah. And he had made some statement around on X around transgender. I grew up with a gay dad, right? So interesting experience, right? Like seeing the world in completely different eyes, seeing what love can look like. Do I fully understand transgenderism? I don't need to, right? Like I don't need to. I can be loving, kind. That's who I am as a human, especially with my background. But what I think all of this requires is safety, right? I think people, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, to speak openly need to feel safe. Because even think about what we're saying. if you don't align with X or Y, there's fear that you might get chastised by other people or, whatever, canceled. How do you create that safe space within you? Because what I will tell you, Will, is hearing you talk about, even from my, and correct me if I'm wrong, being of Christian faith, even talking about that in a disarming way, right? I had an experience with a Pentecostal Christian church when my dad died when I was 15 that pushed me away, right? Some of the things that you had said in that, response to Matt Walsh, I was like, this dude gets it. He sees that, like, it's not that I don't believe in God or a creator. It's just I'm not that. And you cited a Corinthians verse. I always think of Matthew 7, centered around kind of the judgment of others and that you will be judged in the same way. It's super interesting to think about. But again, going back to safety, how do you create that safe environment for people to speak their authentic truth? Because it's living in there. And what I do know is a lot of us land right in this gray area, right? But we're afraid to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk about it when it comes up, but my faith is, I'm fairly new to it. My faith is something very personal, but I do call, it's been so good to me. It's made me a better person. It's made me a better husband, father, teacher, everything, that it's hard for me not to essentially evangelize. I want to bring people into what I've discovered to be really wonderful. But I see what a lot of very public front-facing Christians doing the opposite, as turning people away, as it did for you, as it did for me for most of my life. So that's the crew that I'm way more harsh towards people that are claiming Christianity and then acting in ways that I feel are pretty obviously against the teachings of Jesus than the people who just say, like, I just don't want any part of that. It's just not for me. It's like, okay, then you do you. But as far as like, how do I create that environment? The term safe space got kind of co-opted, right? And because it was a safe space from having your ideas challenged. That's not what a safe space is in my classroom. A safe space is you're safe from judgment about your perspective. You're going to get challenged, but you're not going to get challenged in a way of you're a bad person because you think this. Oh, you're pro-choice, you're a baby killer, you're a terrible person. You're pro-life, okay, you don't care about women's rights. That's not the way it's played out. That's not the way it is in my classroom. It's, you're pro-life, I'm gonna have some questions for you. What about this situation? What about that situation? What about this? How about this? If you're pro-choice, whatever, same thing. It's getting them to refine their ideas. So it's a safe space from judgment, not a safe space from having your ideas challenged. And once my kids know that, then they will ask me questions. My students know that. My kids too, I suppose. Once my students know that, then I say, like, constantly challenge me. So I'll be saying stuff like, but what about this? I'm like, that's a great point, blah, blah, blah. And then one kid says, like, they're a Marxist. And I'm like, well, what do you think about this? Or some kid says that they're like, free market, an anarchist or something. Like, what about this? I'm just trying to challenge them constantly. They know that's the game. They know the game is that when they voice an opinion, it's going to be challenged. But I will never say that or allow anyone in the class to say that you're a bad person or a dumb person because you have these viewpoints. You're a Trump supporter, so you're an idiot or you're a racist. No, start leaning into questions to help them refine, and you can understand why they're a Trump supporter. That's what we're going to do in my classroom.
And ultimately, I think what an awesome classroom to go into is to you said something earlier, which is building resiliency and grit is key and fundamental to what I look at as the future learner, right? Like a successful future person. And we're in this day and age where I call it lawnmower parenting, right? It's not helicopter parenting. It's like paving this perfect journey for every child.
Yeah, I've heard that. Bulldozer parenting is what I've heard it called. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea being is, like, we now see, right, there's a very small window of generation that got the medal for, participation. And we see, and that window is now entering the workforce. And look what's happening in the workforce, right? In every industry at scale, especially education. Our industry got hit super hard. I manage hundreds of people and know that, I look at data and trends within my own business and can see that window, right? Yeah. And try to really understand the mentality of someone that, your feelings matter to everyone. And, it's funny. the message I give my kids, my own kids and my family, my 5 kids, is the moment you leave this house and the moment you leave school, no one cares about your feelings. So you have to be strong enough to go out into the world and gather a community, a family, a people that do, so that you can collectively make this world a better place. Like that's what we're trying to put into the world. I do see that we are kind of, and I'm sure you see this in your school, especially private school, right? Because there's an affluency there in some cases. Um, One, have you seen that gap, right? In generation, or even do you see that now with current kiddos? And two, do you think that things are starting to shift and change within the schooling system to where loss and failure? One of my favorite pictures I have on my, and I'll share it again here, is on my screensaver. It says "My Favorite Failures." It's a school in Brazil that celebrates failures, and they write their failures in these little books, and then you can go on the wall and read these kids' failures, which I think is beautiful. Do you see a shift happening in your school personally, and not just your classroom? Do you see what you're doing in your classroom having, and this is important to me, right, on the research side, having an effect on your school as a whole?
Do I see kids getting more grit? No, I'm seeing the opposite. John Haidt's new book. I think I got a copy. I don't know why I'm promoting his books, no, but The Anxious Generation. It's basically about this issue of these kids who are. It was just right here. These kids who are growing up in this way that they're just anxious with everything, and the parents are like, they're just they're lawnmower parents, bulldozer parents, just trying to get any kind of discomfort away from them. So I see it as kind of continuously getting worse. I started teaching in 2007, which is the year the iPhone came out. So I've watched my whole career as this became more and more in front of my students' faces. But that being said, the students at my school love my class because it's different, because I tell them to basically like, suck it up. You're tougher than you think you are. Deal with it. So they're craving it. You can tell, like the kids who have bulldozer parents who they don't want a paved road. They're kids. They like challenges, and they're put in a situation where like the challenges aren't there, and they get really anxious and stuff like that. So what I see is very much is the students like responding to the way that I deal with them, because they're like, oh, I didn't get into my favorite college, and it's like, all right, so what? Yeah, either did I. Don't you? Yeah, but it's like, you'll be fine. Like, I tell them like, why would you put because college because it's a expensive private school I'm at now. So college is like a big deal. You got to get into like these certain name colleges and stuff like that. It's like, guys, why are you giving so much power to these admissions boards and stuff like that to determine your future? It's like, screw that. Like, if you want to get out of my classroom, I say, if you want to get out of my classroom, and I just stand in front of the door and go, no. A lot of you are going to be like, okay, I guess we have to stay in this classroom. And some of you are going to be like, no, I'm going to bust a hole in this wall. I'm going to shimmy up into the rafters and get out. I was like, the ones who are saying, I am going to find success and you can't stop me, you'll find success. Those of you that say like, I wanted to be successful, but then the admissions board didn't want me, you won't. So you have to decide if you're in control of your life, or is this other, entity in control of your life? And they like that. It's a lot more empowering for them to say like, you're going to fail or succeed based on you, and not based on whatever outside, stimuli come inside, whatever speed bumps you have in front of you. They like that. It's a lot more empowering than, well, your success is going to be dependent on whether or not you get into Yale. Like, we know that's not true, Garrett. Like, we know that's not true. Okay. I don't know where these people went to college or anything like that. The people I admire, the best in these individual fields. We don't care about that. Okay. So the kids really, really resonate with like someone, because they don't get it from many places. In my classroom, they like hearing that. They're like, oh, so my life's not ruined because I failed. I got a B- on a test. It's like, no, bro, no, you're fine, but you have to learn and you have to get better, and you have to, develop this mentality of, I'm going to be successful. If you want to come along for the ride, hey, college admissions person, you want to come along for the ride? I'm getting success. You want to come along for the ride? Maybe you'll get some alumni checks in the future. If not, cool. It's up to you. Like, that's the mentality I try to instill in them.
which is awesome because I think they, that by they, I mean students
Yeah.
in general, especially in high school and we see it very similarly, which is, I watch my own kids feel this pressure when I'm literally telling them, guys, it's a game, like play the game.
Yeah, play it.
Cool, play it, like hack the game. I don't like personally when same thing, like when my kiddo comes home and says like, I got like a C minus, I'm like, ah, man, you'll get them next time. And they're like, wait, but kids, you need it used to be 4.0 back in the day. You need a 4.8, to get into the best schools across the country. And I'm like, why? Like I would much rather you be self-aware to know if you're ready for that type of experience, or even if that's an experience that will give you value. The biggest scheme that we've given kids is that high school is everything. And you and I, like you said, both know it's 4 years. And when you're 43 like me, you look back and you're like, what happened in somewhere? I don't even remember. Gosh, I don't even remember. And literally, I tell my kids this all the time. How often, I tell this to parents as well too, how often do you use that academic knowledge in your everyday life that you learned in high school? No, you use those social emotional skills that you build through situations that happened in high school. The bully, you said the wrong word and got caught, smacked in the face, that taught you a lesson. You didn't, and that changed your opinion. Those kind of real world consequences. I think overall, we're seeing a two-part problem. One is a fear of teaching logic and critical thinking skills through authenticity of questioning things, of pushing back. And then you're seeing an insecurity of parents they want to hold their kid up like a medal. My kid's going to Yale, my kid's going to whatever. And ultimately, what is that doing to the child? That's making an insecure child because they don't feel good enough to appease and, impress their parents. So it's so interesting to me because we're in this really, and I look at this as like the biggest issue in our world, right? Like we have to change. We have to, because look what's happening. Look how that plays out in our politics. Oh my God, it's a mess. Our country no longer represents its people, and that is a scary, scary, scary thing. So the work that you're doing is so valued because it's helping to shape high school kids and kids in general to start questioning things, to be the rebel alliance, to go back to initially what we were talking about. So as we wrap up, Will, because it's been and I could talk to you forever because I can see we're aligned on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I'm also interested, maybe that's for another conversation, how your actual opinions show up in the classroom. Do you express them freely? All of that. And then, but I got to get to the title question. Okay. It's the big question. It doesn't have to be, again, no right answer here, but I ask you, Will, what is SMART?
When I went to this private school, everyone there had a PhD. I got the job over someone with a Harvard PhD. I just have a bachelor's degree in secondary education from Penn State. And I was like, oh no, I'm really outgunned here. I'm not that, I'm not that intelligent. I'm just, that's my superpower. My superpower in the classroom is it doesn't come easy for me. I have to learn about what's interesting about it and find my own pathway for it to make sense to me. And then I just share that with my 16-year-old students. So my lack of natural intelligence is my superpower in the classroom. So what I did right away was I just got curious. I think being smart, I really think the hack to it is to be sincerely curious. And that's what I did. So when someone would say something that I didn't know I would ask them. And you ask them a dumb question or something like that, you only have to ask that once. If you ask a dumb question, you only have to ask it once because you get the answer right away. And over time, your questions get more and more refined, less and less dumb. It comes, and you all of a sudden wake up and you go, wow, I know a lot. I'm engaged in a conversation with like really smart people, and I'm like right there. Like, how did this happen? Because I was very humble about what I knew and what I didn't. I didn't know anything, so I just went on this journey to learn it and get I think smart is curious. I really do. And I think that the more that we just lean into curiosity about what we're missing and stuff like that, you will hack that whole thing and be willing to let go of you have the right answers. My ego is not connected with having the right answers, Garrett. My ego is connected with getting to the right answers. So if I'm wrong, that will get me to the right answers. I love being proven wrong. That's great. And I'll change my mind real quick. Okay. I might defend my ideas, but if I can't defend them, they're gone. So, short answer is I think smart is being sincerely, deeply curious. And Albert Einstein said, I'm nothing special. I'm just passionately curious. So he seemed like a smart guy.
Well, I'm going to give you another philosopher, thinker, Socrates, who said, the only reason I'm in this position is I'm the only one to admit I know nothing at all.
Love
So
Socratic method, man. Down.
You know how it is. And I think the best educators in the country have that same mindset of curiosity. I think that's one of the best answers on there because it's simple. It's so simple. And one of the things that you point out is sincerity. It's one thing to play curious, right? But the work is really for people to look in the mirror and start to unpack even some of their, shadow work, their childhood trauma, things like that, that then show up and allow for these kind of blocked mindsets. That's my experience, right? Is you look at a guy like Joe Rogan, I'm sure you look at a guy like yourself, the reason why he had a very similar experience, right? Of like, all of a sudden you're talking with some of the greatest people in everything, right? And how'd I get here? I'm having a little bit of that experience myself in this work, right? Here's this kid with a 1.7. I talked with Dr. Dr. Thomas Hoer, he's like, Garrett, I had you beat. Mine was a 1.65. And I was like, hell yeah. These like formative foundational guys, all driven by the same, experiences across the world, really. So, Will, thank you so much for joining us here on What is Smart. We'd love to have you back on. We have a summit coming up where we're going to invite a lot of really big minds to have some very cool and interesting conversations virtually. Make it easy for everybody. But tell our viewers, if you will, where they can find you on socials, as well as where all your content is in your website.
Yeah, thanks. Especially because I'm going off in this world of like trying to scale what I'm doing. So if this is like, oh, I've been told like I'd love for my kid to be in your classroom, but I can't. Again, it's like I'm only in the classroom for this small group of kids at this one school in this one part of town. Like, so I'm trying to expand it. So yeah, let's go. It's just my name on most places. So YouTube, Instagram is the biggest one. It's just my name, Will, and then Reusch. My online curriculum and online, platform is going to be called Patterdocs. Essentially, the idea is the belief docs of like that there's patterns everywhere. And if you study one conflict, you can kind of understand a lot of conflicts. So there's always application and stuff like that. So you can check out Patterdocs, PATTERDOX.com as well. And then my website's my name. So it's just my name. If you Google me, I'm out there.
Super easy, super easy.
So
and thank you, Will. We really appreciate it. It's folks like you that are actually doing the fundamental work to change the way we educate kids. It's not their issue. It's our issue to solve. And we look forward to, hopefully all of our viewers and listeners go check out your stuff. And we look forward to talking with you very soon. From What is Smart and the Gardens Foundation, I'm Garrett Wilhelm. We will see you next time with another amazing, amazing guest. Take care.